It was high signal. It was very curated, right? We came here focused with a mission, and that was another thing that was culturally obvious. Everyone here was focused. Um, we had people that were builders that had systems themselves. We had people that are developers on the firmware level. We had people that understand how silicon is made and how ASIC chips are designed. And then we had people who know how to turn wrenches and install and service heating systems. So it was focused, but we had both ends of the extreme.
Welcome back to the Compass Mining Podcast. My name is Jarrett, and today I'm joined once again by Tyler Stevens. This is actually Tyler's third time on the podcast, but all for good reason. On the first episode, we were talking about the space, which he is CEO of, which is a brand new Bitcoin citadel in Denver. Well, not brand new anymore, even though it still kind of feels brand new. On the second one, we were talking about Bitcoin mining heat reuse, and we will talk about his book, which is now launched. We were talking about that in the second episode. And today, I was standing by the exit, and as people were coming out of the greatest concert ever, I grabbed Tyler and said, let's sit down and talk. And that concert being Undermined 2025 HeatPunk Summit. We're just going to, I was like, Tyler, could you get on mic with me? Could you give me 5 minutes and let's go through takeaways? So before we do that, first of all, how are you feeling post-summit?
Well, first, thank you for having me, Jarrett. It's awesome to be back, and I'm happy to chat about this. You lined it up perfectly. It was like, go get a building, write a book about a subject, and then bring everyone to the building to talk about that subject after reading the book. And that's exactly what we did. And then on Compass podcast to talk about each step of the way. So it was fantastic. Let's get into it.
Okay, let's get into it. I've sent you over some ideas before about some kind of takeaways. And the way I basically sold this to you is, Tyler, please hop on after. If you give me the time on the Monday, we're going to record it on Monday the 24th, and we're going to launch it on Tuesday the 25th to let people get at it. I feel like after any conference, it's like a dream, and you have to write down your thoughts immediately after. Otherwise, it just all kind of blends together, and you're left with either a good feeling or a bad feeling, or an okay feeling, or like maybe I shouldn't have gone, maybe next year I won't go. And actually, I was talking about crypto conferences coming up with my buddy who's trying to get into crypto and Bitcoin and all this, and he was asking, and I was like, hey, if you can't afford to go to the actual get into the room, you could just go to the city and there's a bunch of satellite stuff. Now, I know that this is different with you guys because yours was very high signal, very high alpha. Everyone who was in that room probably had reason to be there. But anyways, let's just run through the ideas. So something technical that you learned or a takeaway. We're going to go one by one. So what's something technical that you learned that you didn't know before that just by being next to the right person, they pointed out, oh yeah, maybe it's this way?
The most important thing I learned, and I think everyone else in the room learned from all the technical panels, which were primarily on day two, was shout out to Brett Rowan, who works at Upstream Data, all about PyASIC, the Python library. And he expressed his frustration with when you buy a machine, a Bitcoin miner from one of these Chinese manufacturers, you plug it in on a rack, much like some of the larger sites do. It's not an issue. You use the stock firmware. The companies like Brains and Luxor and Vanish have made it easy to install an aftermarket firmware. But when you're trying to do something a little bit more weird with these machines, and that is use them in a heating system or something like that, being able to talk to them and send commands, because they are computers, is paramount. And he just outlined very clearly how there's no standardization in how these things are communicated with, even at the SSH level between models of the same company. So what's mine are, Model A, Model A plus, Model A plus plus, and then same thing for Bitmain. And you basically have to rewrite the code, and he is supporting this whole thing as basically the writer of PyASIC, this Python library. And it was just fascinating to hear essentially that we have to redo all this code every time a new model comes out, anytime you want to be able to, because what PyASIC does, for anyone who's listening isn't sure, it's essentially like a pickaxe. So when you send a command in your fleet, in your farm, and you want that command to go to one WhatsMiner, one Bitmain, one's 2 years old, one's 1 year old, one has this little PSU, one has that PSU, the commands aren't the same. They're not standardized. And PyASIC does that. You send the command through PyASIC, it then talks to all the different machines from all the different manufacturers and all the different firmwares. And I think to most people in the room and the people I chat with after the fact was, Brett very may well be creating the standard for communicating with Bitcoin miners that people don't even realize. If he gets more support, more people contribute to PyASIC, this Python library, this is how these open source standards emerge. USB-C, things like this. The NACS charger, the North American charging standard that Tesla, they made a great product, and now Fords are using their charger. So how do we get there in Bitcoin mining to really make it easier for everyone? That was really cool to see.
Perfect. And to follow up with something technical, because I think that Bitcoin and Bitcoin mining are very, very intimidating to people, and for two reasons. One of them is technical, and one of them is cultural. So let's hit on the cultural part. What was something culturally that you learned, or that was kind of like a narrative, or some kind of like I don't know, yeah, something cultural?
I have a good answer for this one, and it's essentially for the OGs, and by the OGs I mean the guys a little older than us, Jarrett, that lived through the PC revolution, the Bob Burnett's. We've got some members here at the space that contributed in that industry. They saw the manifestation of the personal computer. They worked through all these things in the late '90s, and so many of them were like, I've never, ever, ever seen an industry before where you're relying on buying a product that has no documentation, desoldering the chips, i.e., the bit-axe, resoldering them onto a circuit board after you reverse engineer and hack the pinouts to figure out how to talk to it, and then installing these whole business models. I think this is crazy, and maybe I'll get some flack, but like the whole business model of a Brains, a Lux, or a Vanish is I'm going to jailbreak a product. Like, that's crazy that we're in this position. And so culturally, I think everyone was just smiling because we're still doing it. Like, we're building these systems with junkyard scraps, essentially. And to that degree, as I just outlined it, these people with that experience have said, I've never seen something like this before. And I just love that everyone is saying, screw it, we're doing it anyways.
Okay, screw it, send it. It's got to get done. We have to get from A to B, so we're going to find the way to get there. Kind of along that, and I guess when I mean culturally, I mean I just think there's so many things. I have friends who are trying to understand Bitcoin mining, and they're trying to understand Bitcoin, and they go on X. I'm like, just go on X, create an account if you don't have an account, and sit there for 20 minutes a day. And whether you're on the subway or you get home, just hop on the couch and just sit there and just try to understand what people are talking about. Was there a word just going along, and this isn't something I'd asked you before, but was there a word that kept coming up throughout the summit that just kind of maybe encapsulates what the summit was about? One word?
I think you already said it at the beginning. It was high signal. It was very curated, right? We came here focused with a mission, and that was another thing that was culturally obvious. Everyone here was focused. Um, we had people that were builders that had systems themselves. We had people that are developers on the firmware level. We had people that understand how silicon is made and how ASIC chips are designed. And then we had people who know how to turn wrenches and install and service heating systems. So it was focused, but we had both ends of the extremes. I mean, I thought that was hilarious. You've got an HVAC guy and Peter Todd in the same room, and we're here to talk about Bitcoin heating systems. So that level of focus, but the wide breadth of expertise in the same vein was fantastic to see.
Lovely. And you've just mentioned Peter Todd and, someone there from HVAC. Continuing on, who was someone who either you didn't know before the conference and you met, or someone who you knew but you hadn't met IRL that really left an impact on you?
I'd have to give a shout out, and the obvious answer to me is the co-host Cody Harris. So I went to the Wyoming Sovereign Roundup put on by Tristan, author of Bitcoin and Beef, I think, up in Wyoming. It was in Cody, Wyoming last summer, camping trip, sovereign food, sovereign money, all that kind of stuff. And Cody was on a panel. It was my first impression of him. I was just in the audience, and he talked about decentralizing mining, ocean pool, things like that. He mentioned he was heating his house. And so I reached out to him, I think, on Telegram after the fact. Maybe we chat briefly at that conference, but we really weren't friends or anything. And then over the past 6 to 8 months, we've discovered that we are very much aligned and very much interested in the same thing. He's actually living it and doing it. He has cheap power and no natural gas where he lives, so he's kind of in that miner utopia we talked about the last podcast, where heating systems make sense. And so he was 100% my co-host for this conference, and super valuable, like from building the hot tub to bringing a trailer filled with tools to having everything on standby, curating the panels with me, organizing our caterers on Saturday that accepted Bitcoin, and then everything in the middle, everything in between, from everything that basically I couldn't do, Cody did. And my favorite part about Cody is this was our first time really getting to know each other in person. And same goes for the folks here at the space. and our team here. He just talks to you like he's known you for 10 years. Just a totally awesome dude. Super focused, super mission aligned. I wish he lived a little closer. He'd be a huge value add to this space.
I love that. And kind of continuing on with like the personnel and the people who are in the room. What was the panel that you enjoyed the most? Maybe one that you, and this may be a biased opinion, one that you emceed that you learned a lot, or one that you were able to sit in on or hear from that you thought, per basically the phrase of the summit, high signal. Compass Mining makes Bitcoin mining accessible to everyone. Whether you're investing in one machine or thousands, our customizable solutions are tailored to meet your needs. We are your experts in Bitcoin mining, offering a platform where individuals and businesses can purchase hardware, host machines, and access a range of ancillary services. Start mining in as little as 48 hours with our turnkey hardware online and mining directly to your Bitcoin wallet within 2 business days. Discover more at compassmining.io and see how we can power your success.
Man, they were all so good in their own way. I'll give an interesting answer. The one that I thought was very, very important and one of my favorites, not so much because it's the most fun topic to talk about, because it's something that we've been neglecting. And that was a panel called The Adoption Landscape with Colin Crossman, space member. He works for the state of Wyoming. He's a lawyer. And a friend of ours named Rachel Nixon, who works at IMA Insurance, which insures infrastructure for large Bitcoin miners. And a friend of mine named Mike, who works and sells HVAC heating systems to large businesses in the western slope of Colorado. And this panel was all about, and Dylan Sieb, CFO for this space, as a structural engineer as well, someone who signs engineering drawings. So this panel was all about, okay, we're all giddy about this. We're excited. We'll put an S19 into my HVAC duct, right? How does that affect your property insurance? How does that affect the fire marshal? How does that affect, the certification? Does it have UL certification? Does it have tip over protection? All of these things that we don't really think about, but we live in a regulatory state where you have to check these boxes. You're not going to be allowed to go and sell a product into a neighborhood or a business that they can't get insurance on. It's going to make their rates go up, or is going to burn their house down. And we just lived through it. Like Colin gave a great example about how he told his insurance or his bank that he had a data center. Well, it turns out it wasn't a data center. It was a Bitcoin mining operation in Wyoming, and he was debanked, right? So this is a very real thing that happens. And so do you tell someone this is a heating system? I remember guys flying in for the conference literally texting me, just went through TSA. They're carrying like a little space heater, 3D printed miner. I told them it was a heater, not a Bitcoin miner. It's literally like linguistics. And so do you lie? Do you not lie? Is it even lying to begin with? You tell them it's a heating system. It just happens to mine Bitcoin. Does it make your insurance go up? All this stuff. It was super, I think, important for us system builders to, and also the ASIC manufacturers like Block and Bob Burnett and Canan that were in the room, to see that we need these things to be performed.
It's so incredible how powerful words are and nomenclature within a culture to describe something. If you call it a Bitcoin miner, you may have a problem with TSA. If you call it a heater, it totally gets through. I've been onboarding a buddy over the last week. He's just been hitting me up on WhatsApp, asking questions. We've been exchanging voice notes. And if you call it Bitcoin or a digital asset, I told him it's just a savings account where when you change back into dollars, you're going to have more dollars. That's all I said. It's just a savings account. And he's like, oh, okay, I get it now. I was like, okay, great. Now we found the wording to be able to contextualize for people.
Nice.
Well, the last question that I have that it's kind of ready, and I'm going to add a little spice onto it because the question is really, what will you improve for V2? But the question I have looking at all the pictures was, are you going to be able to even do it at the space, or are you going to keep it to strict invite only and you're going to have like a Royal Rumble to see who gets the tickets? Because I know that however many tickets you put out, there's going to be 2 to 3 times as many people wanting to join, because I know you sold out this year and I alone want to go and I wasn't able to go. And I don't think Curtis Harris was there. I know Curtis, would probably love to be there. So there's a bunch of people, not just from the Compass ecosystem, but the entire Bitcoin mining ecosystem that want to be. So how are you going to improve for V2? And then how are you guys thinking about the high signal, the curation of doing it at the space? Could it be like across multiple locations? I know that it's only, 36 hours since you've come off the summit, but what are some of the thoughts you have right now?
Yeah. So let's just kind of walk back to what this summit is. And it's not a typical Bitcoin mining conference. You're not coming here to buy a space heater. I think, although some people did. We are gathering because we've identified a potential way for Bitcoin mining to scale, which is through heating appliances and applications. And then we've identified all these challenges that are in our way to execute on that. We don't have access to chips. There's no standardization to talk to the machines through firmware. The control boards aren't open source, yada, yada, yada. Once all those challenges are solved, do we even need to meet, right? So that's why it's a summit. And so I think I would like to continue doing it at the space and keeping it. The answer to your question is yes. Perhaps we'll have to do invite only, but this curated high signal summit where it's the people that are designing the systems. Because if you think about it, if someone had built an HVAC furnace and someone builds a water heater and someone builds a boiler and all these different products, where they should be going is the HVAC conference, the water heater conference, the pool heater conference, and connecting with those people. This is kind of a let's all touch base as the Bitcoiners in this industry and talk about what's working, what's not, what challenges, how do we solve this, how do we do that, where you're kind of coming back to home base, so to speak. I envision that's how it will play out. And so I'd like to have the more killer products next year, more innovations there. So these heating applications, these heating products powered by hash rate. I'd like to have a little bit more contractors. We had, I think, 3 or 4 that ended up coming, which was awesome. We had an hydronics engineer, an HVAC guy. I'd like to get some more. I'd love to have a more organized repository of information. So that was something we closed out the conference with was, where do we go from here? Because it is this unique summit gathering of experts in certain fields. Where do we go from here? And one of the big recommendations was, Tyler, you have this hash rate HeatPunks Telegram chat, and I agree with them. Pinning messages doesn't do anything to like compile information. We need either a wiki or a forum or something, because we are in this state where we're trying to do something that the machines aren't designed to do. The parts to build the machines that aren't available to just build what we're trying to do from scratch, and also education, certification, maintenance, all this stuff that we've talked about before. It's covered in the book. We're kind of trying to solve everything at once, which is very hard. And that's why I think it's important to keep the conference focused and keep improving upon that. Oh, hey, maybe you went out and tried to convince an HVAC group at an HVAC conference how to do this, or how to train them to onboard this, or how to service that. Did it work? Did it not? Did you have to call them digital boilers, or did you have to call them Bitcoin miners? Like, back to linguistics, all this stuff. And so I envision Undermine to serve as this central report back gathering for all the industry leaders trying to push forward hash rate heating, Bitcoin mining under the guise of heating infrastructure, to come back and debrief essentially on how we move forward.
So I love that. And I love that it's like we're doing something that's so new. So we have to actually get together every once in a while, beyond just the Telegram, beyond other means of communication, beyond all the content that you share on X. And I'm going to leave your X in the episode description so people can follow you. With the industry moving as quickly as it has, and even since I've met you and you sat down on a couch in the space, we spoke for 45 minutes and you talked about how much exahash could be online if only 1% of comfort heating, and it blew my mind. I was like, you got to come on the podcast. Since that has happened, I've now been aware of multiple retail products, one that you showed me, and then Canaan came out with their own. My question then is, are you guys going to have to meet sooner than a year away? Because I feel like yes, but I don't know what the bandwidth looks like for that.
It's a good question. I've also thought about, do we try to time it to meet at the beginning of the heating season, at the end, so you have some time to go innovate and absorb and integrate with your learnings for the next heating season. But it's a good point. We're going to make progress faster than people think. I mean, just 2 years ago, PyASIC didn't exist. Just 2 months ago, the Canaan space heater didn't exist, which, for anyone who's not aware, is like the first instance of literally the inventor of the Bitcoin ASIC, Canaan. They changed the form factor and they made it easier plug and play so that it no longer looks like an industrial shoebox that's meant to go into a rack. It's meant to go on the floorboard of your home and heat your space. So, and then there's companies like HeatBit as well that are just pushing through all the hurdles right now anyways. Everything we complained about, it can be done. Like HeatBit went out and sourced chips from a small order quantity, like off of another batch, and they integrate it. They design their own hashboard, and it's really simple to set up. What's the trade-off there? It's $1,000 for a space heater. That's 10 terahash. And so I think it's a good point that you brought up. Innovation is going to keep happening faster. We've seen the likes of the 256 Foundation out of Bitcoin Park getting a couple 100,000 Intel chips that were bought by Proto and Block, donated to them to support open source mining development. So they're already working on an open source hashboard, the Ember One, an open source control board. A grant is out there that exists for the Libra board. That's a Linux-based control board, and things like that. An open source firmware, all this stuff that we need. So the projects are out there. The people are working on it. Stuff is starting to get funded. All the while, I don't want to put all my eggs in one basket, but Proto and Block have promised to deliver chips and just sell chips. So they were at this summit, as was Bob Burnett, who's working on a project called M-Fibers, a chip of his own. I think those projects are maybe 10 to 18 months away from actually selling the chips. And that's when it's like, okay, we talked about this for so long. We complained for years. Now the solutions are here. What are you going to go do, right? Go solve the problem. And we'll have to see what companies emerge from there. Did I answer the question?
I think you
I think
did.
we need to meet once a year at least.
Yeah, because I was going to say, I don't see a way in which you guys don't at least have a dinner at Vegas or something if you're going to attend, or you guys have a side thing where it's like a panel or whatever, and you guys kind of all get together. Because I just feel like this moves so quickly, and you have Bitcoin, and within Bitcoin, it's like babushka dolls, and then you have Bitcoin mining, and then you have the heat reuse, right? And it's just like you guys need to meet more than once a year. I wanted to ask now, let's shift a little bit. How was your book received? I saw you doing some signings on a picture I saw on X. How was the book received? How did that work? How many books did you get out there? And then where can people get the book if they're listening to this now? Because on the previous episode, you kind of hyped the book, but it hadn't launched. But now that it's launched, I'll obviously leave wherever people can get the book in the episode description.
Yeah, so the book launch was fantastic. I handed out probably 70 or 80. I've got a copy here. We've got some more left over at the space. And really I was thrilled to have the book. This was like the formal launch of the book, and it was awesome to announce it at Bitcoin Park for their NEMS Energy and Mining Summit. They had a hash tub out there, a Bitcoin hot tub from Schnitzel out there. But this summit, like every single panel at this summit, is a chapter in this book. And so if you thought any of it was interesting, or you needed to go back, and we're going to release the recordings of the panels so that people can learn about this industry. But if you wanted to go back and explore one topic a little bit further, it's all summarized in here. And I think this is, really just a great showpiece for an emerging sub-industry of Bitcoin mining and a possible way it plays out. And hey, there's a lot of people working on it. There's a lot of people that also think it can grow into one of the larger use cases of Bitcoin mining, perhaps the largest. And it was awesome to hand this out. And really, I've gotten good feedback from everyone that's read it thus far. I didn't know about this. I didn't know about that. Even things as simple as some people thought immersion oil flowed through hydro machines. And, a little breakdown of how air versus immersion versus hydro works. And if you think about it, Bitcoin miners have been cooled for nearly a decade with all these different cooling systems. And so having some compiled resource from the technicals to the conceptual, the philosophical, why would you do this? How do you do it? I think it's great to have, and I hope it's a successful book for everyone else.
I know that was a collaboration with Brains. Can you get it off the Brains website? Where can people get it if they want to get it? And when I say that, I'm being selfish. I want a copy. So
So I'm on brains.com/books right now. I don't see it in there, and I know it's going to be in there any day now. So it might be there by the time we launch this podcast. They're filling up their stock in their US warehouses and their European warehouses, and it will also be on Amazon shortly thereafter. So brains.com/books is where you can find it. There'll be a free ebook, and you can purchase a physical copy. They also love to hand them out at conferences. So if you have any conferences lined up, look out for the Brains guys, and you can probably snag one. And we might be recording an ebook as well.
Ooh, that's exciting. People love ebooks. I mean, I think they're kind of like podcasts. You can be at the gym, you can be doing anything, you could be out running, you could be in the car. It's a great passive way to kind of digest content. I want to give you some time back. I know that you're super busy and you're coming off the summit, and you probably now a lot of people to talk to. The book is out. The space is also like, I feel like this was like almost like a debutante ball for the space, having people in there 2 days in a row, and just, it looked awesome. And I don't really normally get FOMO about conferences because I'm like, oh, there'll always be another one. But to be there at the first one, I feel like I missed out. So hopefully I can be on the short list next year. Thank you, Tyler, for hopping on. And if you're watching this on YouTube, subscribe. If you're listening to this on a podcast platform, please subscribe. Make sure you're following us on X, LinkedIn, and YouTube at Compass Mining. And Tyler, thank you so much again for your time.
Thanks for having me, Jarrett. It was awesome to have some of those other Compass guys. Sorry you didn't make the cut, but we did have the Compass miners powering that hot tub. Shout out to that. Obviously, shout out to Shannon's wife and Silver Spoon Catering that gave us catering on Friday. It was awesome to have the Compass guys here. You'll definitely have to be here next year. And lastly here, I do think it was something very pivotal for the space because it's one thing to host our weekly educational meetups from BitDevs to Bitcoin 101. And that's awesome for the guys that are developing and the people that are new to Bitcoin. And we want to continue to do that, onboard businesses, educate the public, yada, yada, yada. But as you said, kind of want to push the needle for the people that are really in the weeds as well and offer high signal value to them, the people who have been in the thick of it for 10 years. And for the space to be somewhere that they can come and expect that level of signal, we hope to continue doing that.
Yeah, I've always felt very jealous of the space after I visited it because I just don't have something physical like that in the city where I am, or the two cities I kind of live between. So maybe one day I'll move to Denver. We'll see. But Tyler, thanks so much, and I hope you have a good week, man.
Take care. Thank you.